What's up, everybody? This is A7X Fan Ben. Welcome back to the Pirates CSG podcast. This is the next part of the interview with the amazing game designer Mike Mulvihill, and you can find all the resources and whatnot that we talked about in the description below. And please consider also checking out the eBay affiliate link in the description to help support my content and everything I do to try to keep this game alive. Thanks for listening, and let's get to the episode. Your thoughts on a few custom ships. So the customs database spreadsheet, if you go down to the bottom on the tab for Pirates of the Epic Seas. That's like a fantasy custom set. We don't have to spend long on this. We can keep rolling through. But for example, I think it's just interesting to see how things have grown over time because the original point build, the build total was 30 and then it was increased to 40. And my friend Billy and I, we like to play games like as big as possible. So you'll see the first four ships in my fantasy set, they're all like Cursed Five Masters with like 20 plus point costs. And like it kind of gets to what I was talking about earlier. Like I don't know how to price them. Like I do my best and I want to play test them. And some of them are in the Vassal campaign game 4 right now, which is like the biggest game ever. So it's gonna be crazy. But like Black Star is like a 24.5 master, but it's got a new ability. So on a 5 or 6, all ships within L of the ship have their base move reduced to S on their next turn. But it can only be used when the ship's linked crew is aboard. So it's kind of like trying to nerf it a little bit, because then Moon Sorcerer, the linked crew, I think is 10 points. So it's kind of, maybe the ability could be a little bit overpowered on that ship, but it's also got a really high cost and kind of a nerf. So I don't know. It's kind of just an open-ended discussion about like how things change over time with fan-made customs.
Right. And so this is kind of like you've touched on basically everything we've talked about tonight in some one way or another. The first one is like, how do you value things in a point-based game? And and then what does that mean? So yeah, like you're absolutely right. If you're talking, so I'm just looking at it and thinking in my head. I can't actually. What's weird is I can't see that ship. It's cut off by the header.
Yeah,
but it's really very strange. It's like I can see the bottoms of all the words. The goal would be. Oh, there you go. Thank you. The goal would be that it's an interesting little. Oh yeah, that one works way better than the first one. I don't know what that is. So here's a crazy. This is where it becomes, I guess, philosophical, if you will. There's probably in the big picture nothing wrong with anything you've done. So I don't want to go in and start going, oh, I can't believe you did this, you fool, because that's not true. Okay, and this is the reason where the point-based system comes into play. So let's say I throw this ship into the old system, right? 5 masts, base Mulvhill, the cannons, blah, 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 and it comes out to 24 points. Okay, and then I look at that going, holy crap. Maybe I can do it 124-point point, but I can't do all of these other ones that are in the 20s, high 20s. 124.1 would be just like a tip of my hat to those guys out there who are like, I want the biggest ship and the most points, and I want one ship out there that's going to survive to the end of the game. And you go, okay, a little tip of the hat to you, sir. Here's this crazy off-the-charts ship that's got this crazy off-the-charts ability, and it's got thing. And this is where the point system works different than the eyeball system. So in an eyeball system, you look at this and go, I made these ships that fit a game model that I like to play. 60-point or 80-point ship things. So a 20-point ship, again, a 25-point ship is really only a quarter. I'm going to link it to its crew member, its ability, so that's another 10. And in your mind, you're justifying your whole story. You're eyeballing it to a point. And then you're like, I gave it this over-the-top power. I don't know if that's going to work. But you're not even thinking things. I look at this and I start to go, crap. this is too high, or the one is too high. The second one, all right, you know what? I got to move cargo down to 3. What does
Yeah.
that mean? That means I can only ever get 3 crew on it at any given time. 2, if I want to still use it to pick up treasure. Is this going to be my ship that I use to blockade and fight and be in the front of my fleet to hunt or stop other players from doing things? Or is this a ship that I just do with is this a ship that I'm going to also need to pick up treasure? Because if I put on, if I reduce this cargo down to 3 and I can only get 2 crew under it, it's only picking up 1. So maybe now I don't have any crew. Well, I need to have at least 1 to get this cool power going. So, is a cargo of 2. And all of a sudden now the points come down from 24, let's say, to 18. Now I look at it and go, okay, is this ship interesting to players? Well, it's got this cool linked ability with this cool power ability. It's got the standard base move. It's got really weak cargo because the goal of this character and this ship is to do this thing. That's the kind of the logic process you have to work with in doing both sides of the spectrum. But if you're going to side more on the numbers thing, you got to kind of ride that through. You got to go, okay, in my number system, not 24 points. I got to get it down to like 17, 18. What do I reduce down? Do I do that? I maybe S and S as opposed to L. I can't remember if that's faster or slower or cheaper
Yeah,
or not.
faster in that case.
Maybe I take the 3 middle cannons and make them 3L rather than, or the 3 end cannons and say it's 3S, 3S, 2L, 2L. I start to play with the math to get it to where I want it to be, but try to keep the flavor of what the initial intention was. Okay, which is I will definitely want this cool new thing that I got this used with the ability can only be used with with the captain or the moon sorcerer, excuse me. So that's how the two sides play, if you will. That's how I tried to make them play together. So I look at it and go, okay, I can afford 1 ship at some kind of crazy over the top value, in a set, because I know that that's going to be really triggering positively to a certain group. Maybe every faction has 1 at that level. And so now you got this kind of like, oh, this is kind of cool, and so, even if I have a 25-point cursed ship, but I also have a 25-point English ship and a 25-point, in that same set. And then all of a sudden, and then I start to make up the parallel story. You got my takeaway always when I'm looking at the things is, what are you, person who created this, trying to say? And you said it right off the bat. I play big games in which I want big, powerful ships because we're playing X points way beyond the kin of normal thing. And in
Yeah.
which case, then I go, okay, under that set of circumstances, this looks perfectly fine.
Yeah.
If I say no, you're going to play a 40 regular rules of thing, then I'm going to say that almost all these ships probably don't work.
Mhm.
There's an 11 in here somewhere, but they're just too high. They're just too high value. Then so there's my parameters, my one side of the pendulum on one side and the pendulum on the other side. Then you go, okay, well, now is this an effective ship? And this I don't know from you, and that is, what do you want these ships to do? What is in your mind the role of each ship? When you kind of walk through your curse set and you start to go, okay, wait a second, I have an awful lot of between 20 and, well, you have the grand apocalypse of 28, but between 20 and 24 point things, and there's a 35 down here, which, oh my god, I can't believe
Yeah.
this. But you have these ships and you're like, what differentiates the Black Star? And you can't just say, oh, its ability is different, because and that's part of what differentiates them, obviously, because that differentiates every ship. But what role do you want the Black Star to do? Now, you don't have to do it on every single ship, because that would take you the rest of your life and you don't have enough time to do that. And I never had enough time, but I can say stuff like, I have a bunch of these 15, I need these 13-point ships, whatever it is, or 10-point ships, or 7 or 8-point ships, or 9-point ships. They're all going to be about the same. I can twist them up and maybe say, okay, instead of a SS, it's an SL, or maybe it's 3S's, or maybe its cannons are different. And it's basically, it's got a pretty plain normal ability. and it comes in. Those are the throwaway, ships, if you will, for lack of a better term.
Mhm.
Um, but when you start to get into the ships that you want people to remember and you want people to play and you want them to have flavor within the, let's say in this case, the curse set,
Yep.
you want your ship, the Moon Sorcerer, to be like, have this feel when people play it. When I see the Moon Sorcerer in your fleet, I think to myself, crap, he's going to be doing this, because this is a signature part of his fleet and a signature part of the of this subset of his custom Epic Seas set. And then you go and that's the kind of stuff, as a game designer and a game developer, that's what I'm looking for. I want to know, why is this ship, what's the difference between the Mirage and the Black Star? What makes the Black
Mhm.
Star the cool, rare, 5-masted ship? And if the other ship is like effectively the exact same, except their abilities are different, then all of a sudden the Black Star does not pop as much. You
Yeah.
know?
Mhm.
You know what I'm saying? So it
Absolutely.
becomes and this is again going all the way back to, I repeat myself so much. Oh God. But what it really goes down to, Ben, is sometimes you throw out the really cool stuff. And I don't mean throw it out. You're never going to get rid of it. You're going to move it somewhere else, you know. But you sit there and you go, okay, where I'm going to move, I'm going to do another, I'm going to take, I got to look at the difference between Black Star Mirage, Hell Rising, Devil's Glory, those are all 1 point apart.
Mhm.
What's the differentiator between them? Can I take one and, like I said, make it like really weirdly unique,
Yeah.
and do this thing where maybe they don't ever, what if it was Cargo One, and it's just like the only thing they can do is put their cat that linked, person on here to get this power. What does that do to the game? That means this guy is not ever about treasure. He is going to be out there hunting and protecting the rest of his fleet so that they can get the treasure. Well, if that's the case, I'm going to have a couple of, lieutenant ships and a couple of peon ships and a couple of other people who do this kind of thing. And when you start putting, and then you're going to have the guy who like really wants to stab him in the back, even though they're cursed, so he doesn't care and doesn't listen to the other leader. And so I'm going to make this ship do this thing. You begin it's not just math.
Yeah.
Math gets you only so far in the game. It
Yeah.
ends up becoming story. If you, like you
Yes.
said earlier, it's not chess where every piece does the exact same thing, and now it's you and me and basically a battle of our minds.
Yep.
Here, you're trying to also, one, make this cursed nationality flavorful. You're trying
Yes.
to
Yeah.
sell, in this case, you're not, but in my case, I'd be trying to sell this set. And I have to tell my marketing team what is effing cool about the Pirates of the Epic Seas and why it's so cool and what is the unique things in here. Well, we got this ship, the Moon Sorcerers, the new leader of the Cursed, and
Exactly. Yep.
they have their own ship and they do this thing. And all of a sudden now I got a story. Now, that's part of it, and that's Mike. Mike does this because Mike, like I said, is a storyteller up front. But then I also have to, so that's part of it. That's part of the marketing, is always story thing. But then I have to think about, okay, if I'm making a fleet of ships for this faction, where's the role? Everybody's got to have a game role. And that's actually part of the other part of that process of like, what are they doing in a game? If I put this ship in my fleet, what do I expect? I have to try to still win the game. I can't make ships that don't win the game. I can make a ship that takes no treasure, but that better mean that the rest of my ships are prepared to do the dirty work and go and find the treasure and be the targets for somebody else hunting the treasure and all this kind of stuff. While I have these handful of ships that are not treasure hunters, they're the protectors. Now I have a mechanical story, if you will. So I have a fictional story that I'm telling. I have a mechanical story of saying, when you're building fleets in this um, theme, if
Yep.
you will, I need them to do this thing. And then at the end and bottom of the line, it has to work. It has to be good game mechanics.
Yeah.
There's something to be said for fun. There's something to be said for story. But the bottom line, if you sit down and every time you build a cursed fleet, you lose because they're not balanced and they kind of suck and it doesn't really work, you got a bigger problem than the other two.
Yeah.
I can change the other
True.
two in a heartbeat. It's hard as hell to change that third one. If it's not working, it's just not working. Again, i.e. the Dutch.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you want to figure out, like, okay, what is the theme of the set? What is the theme of the ships? How did they make an army together? I do find it funny that you classify them as rare and common. And you
Yeah.
have, oh my god, you have like, oh
Mostly,
no, this is
yeah. For
and so you sit and you make those kinds of decisions, and you then throw in this case you would test it.
yeah.
You would test your theories.
Yeah.
So if your theory for
Me
this
too.
set is, I want effective long-term play, these guys got to last a long time because we're playing a 60-80 point game. There's a lot of ships out there. They have to survive to the end. If they're all battered in the first 2 turns of the game, then this is a failure, another type of failure. So you want these robust, powerful ships that do a bunch of things and have really kind of, powers that fit like a cursed mindset, that do some interesting things in the game. That's cool. Then you have to follow through with that. You have to go, okay, but you can say those words all day and all night, but if I sit down and I make a fleet and I can't even, do anything, and there's no way I'm going to win, and I'm going to know that really early, 2, 3 turns in, I can't win the game, as everybody's picking up everything off all the islands and I'm like
Yeah.
slugging along, or maybe I'm just trying to partake by hiding, and attacking them from, once they grab stuff. That could all work, but if it's so long or so hard to pull off, then you got to go back and you got to go, okay, that was a bad plan. I mean, there's something in that plan that works, but it's not playable. And so then you start to go, okay, well, what would make it playable? Well, maybe, you know um in a let's say 75 point game, if I only can get 3 ships in, that's probably not very effective. So maybe I have too many in the 20 to 25 point realm. So if I was doing that, I got to figure out a way to reduce it, which is why the point system works so well, is because I can go in and say, okay, what if I made it 4 cargo? What's that do to the number? What if I made its movement S? What does that do to the number? What if I raise the difficulty on its cannons? What does that do to the number? I really like the ability, so I don't want to change that. But the ability is technically, right now, let's just say, almost a 30 point ability. I don't know how much Moon Sorcerer is, but let's say it's 6 points. So now we have a 30 point ability. So that just reduced, so I
Yeah.
want that ability to say, maybe on this ship, its cost is half or for free, and then
Mhm.
all of a sudden you're starting to play with numbers and values, and trying to tell mechanically the story as well as
Yeah.
fictionally, and then making it about playing the game. Because when it's all said and done, this is a thing that happens a lot more in role playing, if you will,
Mhm.
where people will like I make 2 new characters every night. Well, that's fine, but are they playable characters? Or are they just you making a story and then making stats to back that story up? You know, and that's cool. And I'm not going to say don't do that. I'm never going to say don't keep doing this, Ben. This is pretty cool. This is pretty effing cool. By the way, just me
Thanks.
looking at this and going, holy crap. It gets me excited. It makes me want to dive in. I want
Nice.
to go in and start going, yeah, well, what about this mechanic? Actually, that mechanic about the ability can only be used when that's actually really cool. I mean, that's cool. I really like that. And I sit there and
So
I look at this going, okay, that's great. 24 points. God, that's killing me. But I understand your point. Now I got to say, well, okay, well, what if I take this guy at 24 points and I take this 25 point hell raising and I take a 23 point Devil's Glory? Well, all of a sudden I'm over what
75,
is it?
80. Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
like, is that effective? How much is the Moon Sorcerer cost? Now I got to add that in, and now what happens? I don't have any other crew, or should I have crew? All of a sudden now you start to go, wait, can I even make an effective fleet?
Yeah.
Can I do that kind of stuff? That is where the play testing and design knowledge comes in. I may I don't know because I don't play that level of game and I haven't played Pirates with any real consistency in years. But when you are doing that, like when I'm doing Villainous now, I can tell immediately this is a mechanic that doesn't work right now. It may work for somebody else in the future, and I'm going to note it because it's a really cool ass mechanic. But I can't squeeze this in right now. That's 30 plus years of game design and development. But and it's also too because I have to have a product that will stand the test of time. Again, kind of like what we did early when we talked about early on. But if I'm sitting there trying, and my first impression is I'm looking at this going, I don't see off the top of my head anything that's horrible or bad or, broken. I would say now I need to prove it. And to me, not you don't need to prove it to me. That's not what I mean. I need to prove it to myself. This is a really cool mechanic. I really like this mechanic. I'm going to use this mechanic. I want to see what this ship does in play. And that's where, like you said, you may be massively overpowered. You may find yourself thinking you're overpowered and end up being massively underpowered. You may also find yourself going, this is a really cool fleet for a whole different game. This isn't, you know what I mean? And so there's your kind of the design struggles. Okay. It's a struggle every time. It's super creative. I love it. I've made a career out of it, but it's the stuff that haunts me, keeps me up at night, is sitting there going, how do I fix this ship that is just not working right? How do I fix this villain character in a Disney? How do I make a card that's going to be really evocative of the mechanics I want to have, but I have to do it in literally, 120 words or 120 spaces, not even words. So, 120 characters. And so you sit there and you ponder that stuff all the time, because that's the creative energy, that's the creative impetus behind the whole thing. But at the same time, it's because you really like this stuff and you really want it to make it work. I mean, this is so hauntingly familiar to me that I'm looking at this spreadsheet laid out like this.
Yeah, that makes sense.
We used I think
well,
did we use Google Docs or Excel? I think we used Google Docs, but I can't remember.
All
I remember is at one point. No, we used Excel.
Wolf sent me some of the original spreadsheets to help make the master spreadsheet, and it looked like Excel. A little bit different, like order of the columns, but definitely similar. So
I would most likely, if you wanted some inside baseball, if we would have been doing this for a point cost type scenario, like each cannon would have been separate. So because each cannon would have had its own value, you wouldn't have valued all that. But effectively, this is how it would have played out.
That makes sense.
So I mean, don't stop.
Oh yeah.
Rule number 1: don't stop. This is really cool. Rule number 2 is, you don't have to, like I said, you get that, I'm just scrolling through your list. You have like a 6-point ship down here and a 4 to 7-point ship and a couple of 8s and 9s. You don't have to like justify them in the game. Those are going to be the game, the filler ships that people are going to use. You don't have to feel like, oh, I have to explain, every single one of my ships. That's not the case. What you do need to do is pick out the ships that you are like, this is the one I'm really concerned about. This is work. And then that will define some other things for you. If like all of a sudden you're sitting there going, I'm playing in a 75-point game, and I have so many ships in the 20s and 30s in this thing, that may be too many because I can never get more than 2 to 3 in there, depending on how much crew and other stuff. And then I'm going to want a thing. And then it's literally how you have to kind of do it. And then you'll go, I don't mind having it so that I can't have, these 3 ships, these 4 ships together because it's too expensive. I can only have 3. And then what are the 3 different combos of those ships, or 6 different combos? In the 3. It depends how many ships you have, how many combos you have. But, you sit there and you start to play with that and go, maybe I overexpensed everything. Maybe everything's a little too high for what your goal is. And that's the other thing. There's something to be said for just doing what you just did here and just say, I'm just going to make ships. Like I said, you can make all the ships up you want. I'm never going to stop you. No one's going to stop you. Just keep making ships. They're really cool. The question then is like, what's their point and purpose? Because we can make a ship that does just about everything in the game, but you also want people, in the long run, I want people to play with them,
Yep.
and so that's probably the piece maybe that you're missing is just looking at these and going, how do I make cool fleets? How do I make cool uh, combos of fleets, combos of ships to make a cool fleet, and how many can I do? And at that point, then you start to go, wait a second, I may have overextended myself here. I may have made too many high end and not enough middle, and or too many that are doing something, and the difference between ship A and ship B is really micro, but they're just effectively the same cost, and they don't do something. And I need I now need a ship that does X. I need a ship that's going to scout the other ships, so maybe I need to make a faster ship that's just an annoying ship, and that's his goal. And then you make those kinds of ships in the game, and then you go, okay, well, you know what? I don't need this other ship that's exactly like this other ship. I don't need these two so close together. I'm going to totally rebuild this ship to do this other thing. Now you save that first ship, you save it in I used to have a database of what I used to call dead ships. That was just ships I made. They don't fit. They don't work. I just put them over there because eventually I may come back to it. In fact, I may even use that ship again back in that same set and just change stuff to make it be less effective, or not effective, but cost less and therefore be more utilitarian, I guess,
Yeah.
than specific,
Yeah.
And then I'd have to rewrite the fiction if I had any fiction. I'd have to, or do some other stuff. But there's nothing that you should ever. Number one, never throw anything out. Always keep it. Always keep it someplace so that you can do it. And
Yeah.
two, until you put it on table and you make a fleet that does the thing you think these ships are going to do, you can't tell.
Exactly,
so you
yeah.
can't tell. I can't tell from this spreadsheet if any of these ships do the thing you want them to do. I could
No.
tell you what I think a ship is going to do, and you can go, oh no, I was thinking of doing this other thing. And that's the other problem too, is what I think and what you think are going to be two very different things.
Yep.
I could say exactly what I said about how I create a thing. I create the story, and then I create the game story, and then I create the mechanical story. If you operate differently than me, then you're going to do that indifferently. You're going to have different priorities, and then there's this bigger priority of what do you really want this combined set to do. I had to sell product, so mine was
Yeah.
very it was very cut and dried.
Yeah,
Make this
exactly.
good to sell product. All right,
Yep.
that's it's not very helpful. Thanks, but it is very necessary to
Yep.
keep my job and to make this go forward.
Yep.
But if I'm sitting at home, I'm thinking to myself, man, I really want a faction that did X. It doesn't mean I'm selling product, doesn't mean I'm doing anything. It's just I'm doubling down on either something that existed or spinning off something. I mean, what I had wanted to do and never was able to pull off, because to me it's a really deep cut. And I think I've done it a couple things. I think I did it mainly with the Spanish, where I just made them meaner and meaner as the sets went on.
Hmm.
But I really wanted to have like an interfaction battle, so that if you took, let's say, I,
Like a civil war.
mainly it came out of like the Pirates of the Caribbean concept of
Yeah.
like there's the English army, but then there's also the great the
East India Trading Company, maybe?
yeah, basically. And so they're both English,
Yeah.
but they don't necessarily get along.
Yeah.
And so I really kind of wanted this kind of interplay within a faction of like, we did a little bit with pirates. No two pirates really. There are a handful of pirates. They were either lovers or haters, and they, didn't like you when somebody would claim that they. But pirates were easier to keep independent. They could all be independent and only working together in a short term.
Yep.
but I really wanted something in a faction thing, but I couldn't pull it off. It was a deep cut. How would I be able to describe that in the game? It would all be fiction based. I couldn't do it with mechanics per se,
Yeah.
but maybe I could have. I just never got that far. We never went down that path, and by the time it was over, we weren't even going in that direction anymore. But the that to me is where I get my thrills. I'm like, okay, what story is this set telling? All right, what story is this nationality telling with their ships? What are these ships telling that support part A and part B of what I've already done? And then, like, how do I make this mechanically interesting to support A, B, and C? I tend to come from it, from the story part. As I said, it's part of my DNA.
Yep.
But there are other people who come directly from it, from the mechanics standpoint, and say, here's what we need in the game, and they'll come the other way. And I love working with those guys because it's an eye opener for me to see the other side of the process. But it's also pretty cool because when you have that, you can now make different stories out of that, and so that. I mean, nothing's right. That's the Mike Mulvihill method of doing things. The Ben method may be totally different, and stuff. But we both end up in the exact same place. Is how the hell does this play on the table?
Yeah.
And so that's why it's so important to play it on the table. For you can call it testing. I just call it playing on the table. Like, I would just, start making fleets and tell people, again, honesty is the best policy. You go, hey, I just made up a bunch of ships. I would like to test them. You interested? I want you to play, a normal set, and we're going to go crazy. We're going to pay 75 points or 80 points or whatever it is, 100 points, and then play it out and just see. And then, what's really funny too is that I can't tell you how many games in which I've started in that kind of thing. Okay, we're going to play this game. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. And then I basically end it after 3 or 4 turns because, one, I've learned everything I think I'm going to learn. And two, if after 3 or 4 turns it's not working, me playing 7 or 10 to finish the game is going to drive me personally insane. Half the time I'm already redesigning everything while we're playing. And then I'm like, okay, I see where it went wrong. I see where it went wrong. Oh, I see what I might need to do. Oh, I should do something that does this. That's me. That's not everybody. Everybody will like to play it through to the end. But in a case where you're just trying stuff out, there's, again, no need to finish everything. You can just try it out and say, okay, this isn't working, or this is exactly what I wanted. This is awesome. Now I'm going to go through my set again to double down on what I think is really cool. And I meanwhile, keep testing and seeing how it goes.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense.
So, that was a really long
that's great, though.
speechifying by me.
Yeah. No, that's really
Your
cool.
podcast people are like, what is wrong with him? Does he take is he on speed when he's talking? I'm like, no, it's just me.
Yeah, it's
just me being me.
Yeah, it's just passion.
Here's the thing.
Game designer.
Here's the thing, Ben. I wish I could do it more. I really do. I love mentoring the game designers and people who want to be creative in the game space in different ways. Because one, in a lot in the early days, in the dark ages of games, that's how I would get new people to work for me. Is like I would actually have to mentor them because there was not a job that was a game designer. There were not people who were game designers. If you were a fan, you were 3/4 of the way to being a game designer, And so then it was like when I was on the inside and I started to see how the business is and stuff that companies actually need, then I was like, and what stuff I needed from people, then it became like, okay, I need to kind of explain to you what's going on here and have you understand it. And, there was a period of time in between jobs where I taught at colleges and high schools here in Seattle because I wanted, because one, people think it's really cool what I do and what I know, but also there's like a lot of, the craziest thing that what we just talked about is if we took the words pirate and everything out of it, it's the same model. If you wanted to be a writer, if you wanted to be any kind of creator or creative, it's the same model. It's like, what are you trying to tell people? What do you want them to do? How do you get them to do it? And how do you justify 1, 2, and 3 with whatever the system is you're using to do that? It's all the kind of the same tools, and I just to me, the coolest thing about it is I use those tools to make games. You may use those tools to um, run businesses. You could be a writer. You could work in entertainment. It doesn't really matter. The end medium is going to have its own unique things. There's probably a step in each one of those for the unique medium that you're working in. But the bottom line is these are all the same kind of steps you need to do. Um,
Yep.
if you're a play tester for me, I also let you know what products we might be looking for in the future so that you can possibly become a designer if you want. If you are a designer for me, I try to tell you stuff, as much stuff up front so that you can give me the best product, allowing, that you can possibly do. I have no, there's no hidden agenda here. It's, I look at it and saying, you want to make this, you want to do this kind of stuff, dude, go for it. I don't feel personally like, oh my God, he's trying to make ships like I did, and I'm genius level at that. I'm not, by the way, just so you know. But I'm also looking at it in the sense that like it's not proprietary.
Yeah.
It's not like if I teach. I have a shirt that says uh, that's it's not pie. Adding somebody to the group of people who can make games does not mean I get less, I get a lesser piece of pie. It's open ended. You
Yeah.
can anybody can do this kind of stuff, but you're just going to need to sit there and go, okay, how do I vet this? How do I make it be right? How do I do the best and then make it fun and playable? That's the game part of this, but can be for anything. So,
Yeah. Yeah. I think you would
wow.
like a lot of the custom sets in this customs database because you like the story driven elements so much. A lot of the sets originate from that, whether it's people's original creative ideas or some of it's historically based. Like there's a historical Portuguese set in here. Some of it's based on existing fictional IP like Bionicle or Legend of Zelda. But that's kind of the angle I took with a lot of the Epic Sea stuff. And I realized the custom set ballooned even back in like 2018 when I was making a lot of it. It ballooned to like gargantuan size, so you never realistically sell like a 1,000 piece set or whatever. But a lot of it's story driven, based on like I've always just had a love of epic stuff and like crazy, like kind of like I've always loved campaign games in this game where you use gold at your home island to buy more ships and crew. So then the game length and size are both almost infinity essentially. Like you could have a 500 ship fleet, or you could have thousands of points in play, which I've done multiple times, and my friend Billy and I have done multiple times together actually on the online vassal module. But a lot of them are story driven, where it's like, how far can I take this, and like, what is the ultimate evolution of the curse? So that's kind of where I took a lot of these, and that's where some of them came from. Like Moon Sorcerer can basically he can cause like ellipses essentially. Like he can like manipulate the moon to block out the sun. So it's like, what would happen then? Maybe ships can't see and they can't see where they're going. So then they have to slow down, which is partly where like some of the abilities might come from. So a lot of it is just kind of like seeing how far I can take it. And also like if I was going to play a 5,000 point game of Pirates when I'm retired or something, like what would I want to see in that game? I would want to see a cursed fleet from hell just absolutely trying to cause an apocalypse. And maybe I wouldn't play them. Maybe I'd try to be the good guys and play the English and try to beat them back with like the biggest Royal Navy fleet ever. But a lot of it for me comes from like playing big games and loving the epic stuff and just kind of seeing like how far I can take it. And kind of I love the point you made about making ships distinctive, because I think sometimes that only might come out in the flavor text, which I've written some kind of crazy flavor text for a lot of these pieces, but it might not come out in the abilities. And I think sometimes I'm okay with that if ships are similar, partly because I like the idea of having just massive fleets with like hundreds of ships per side, and the game could go on for a decade. I mean, it's just like that's the kind of weird thinking that sometimes myself and Xerix get into, whereas a lot of other people, I totally understand. Most people want their game to be finished within 3 hours, maybe less.
no matter what. And then, yeah, you would never use Black Star. Like you'd use a 16-point curse ship instead and see how that works. Because maybe maybe it's only 40-point games or whatever. But I think that's kind of the beauty of the creative freedom of this game and making fan-made stuff is you can just kind of go wherever you want with it. And if people don't want to play it, it's like, well, yeah, you don't play 500-point games. And that's great. Like, yeah, like not everybody has time to, or not everybody wants to even try that out ever in their life, and that's fine. But yeah, I think once in a while I'll send you a few from this to see what you think of it. It might get a laugh out of you too. If you go to the second tab real quick, there's one. I just want to. Xerix asked the question originally about looking at some customs, so I just want to make sure he gets in there a little bit. I'm
Oh,
just going to
sure.
send you just a one quick one.
Which
Skells.
one? What is the? What
Yeah,
is the?
yeah. I just sent a screenshot, and it's also in the Return of Davy Jones tab. It's just a
Oh,
crew.
okay, that was. I was just wanting to make sure I was in. Okay.
Yeah, I find this one
Uh,
interesting because it was actually this ability is actually on a unique treasure. I think weapons. Yeah, the weapons unique treasure from Revolution that you probably created is actually this ability, but then put on a crew. So I'm kind of curious, and I've done some crew like this too. I think 5 is a decent cost. Plus one to boarding rolls in general was usually 2 points. Sometimes the cost went up a little bit over time, but I think 2 points or even one is pretty good. Um, so I think 5 is pretty good. I don't know if you ever thought about putting this ability on a crew rather than just unique treasure, or if it was always just going to
uh,
be like a random chance thing.
no, I have no problem with that. That moving to a ship ability, or even if there was a unique crew that you wanted to do rather than a unique treasure. Um, yeah, yes, no, I have no problem with that. That is actually kind of cool. The point cost 5 for the ability, or what is the
Yeah, just
what
5
am I?
overall. It's just a name crew for 5 points
Oh,
with
it's a
that one
it is
ability.
a crew. Okay,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, no, no, that makes perfect. That makes perfect sense. I don't like I couldn't tell you nowadays what the like I said I don't remember how the points work, but yeah, that would I would have no problem with that being a crew ability. The the funny thing about the crew,
hmm
it's why I always kind of geared the better. I think some of the better abilities towards the treasure because you always had to have treasure in the game. But I know that there are a lot of people who never even played with crew because it felt to them like they were giving up something. You know, that's the other weird thing about quote unquote building for lack of a better term, deck building slash fleet building is what people value. Like
yeah,
when you and I played, I was shocked by the amount of crew that you had, dispersed to the different teams.
yeah,
Not because crew are bad or anything, but one of the things that we had, was like, does anybody really ever use crew? Again, in the early days where we didn't have a lot of feedback, we had the mold, we had to use the mold for crew. So we knew we were always going to include crew, but it was like that's where it started to be like, hey, let's take pictures of people in the office and and let's name things after us and stuff like that. Not because we're silly and we didn't think that they were worthless. It's just the fact that we just had no idea how much people valued it.
yeah,
When I played with you and I was watching you, and then when I watched you play the bigger game, the amount of crew everybody was playing with, that's like one of those things that if like you are teaching somebody to play the game, they're always going to gravitate towards the ships. They're the
yep,
coolest looking thing, they look
yep,
cool on there, they're fun, they're interesting, they're the main driver of the game. That's like almost like a 1.2.0 learning curve.
yeah,
1.0 ships are cool, let's play pirates.
yep,
2.0 is crew will help you win the game.
yep,
And it's like it's interesting to me because there was an awful lot of people who lived in that 1.0 zone until I think maybe Pirates of the Caribbean, where you can get your Davy Jones and your Jack Sparrow and all that kind of stuff. And maybe in the earlier sets that there are a couple of characters that really, double down on the thing. But it's so funny to me that, like, even now you're saying that this is a crew, and I'm like, oh, that's a cool ability. Why'd you know what I mean? It's just like, I'm like, on a crew, that's like a waste of time, but it's not. I get it now. I learned, but no, that's 5 points. That's a good one. This ship gets +1 point rolls for every crew on her. Yeah, that's probably good, because I don't know. I mean, again, yeah, that's probably all right. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's a
I
decent
think
cost.
from a standpoint of costing, yeah, that's like, like I said, when you're doing stuff and you're trying to put, okay, if I'm going to put this means my ship is now 5 points more. So if I put this on a 10-point ship, it's 15. That's half my build, well, old school, half my build cost.
Yeah.
So is that worth it to me to do that? And it depends. I'm going to play a game in which the really coolest thing about this game is that I can play the exact same ships, and by mixing and matching my crew, I can play it differently.
Yep.
So I can say, yeah, I'm going to have one of my ships that's going to do nothing but hunt treasure on other ships, true pirate fashion, if you will, or trying to, destroy it enough to take it over. And so, yeah, putting that on a crew makes perfect sense if that's the game I'm going to play. Now, if I don't play that style of game, or in this next game, I'm going to play something where I'm going to get, I really want the captain powers, and then I'm going to play differently. So it's a great option, and I think the cost works. So
Yeah.
um,
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, that was a great discussion.
All right, that concludes this part of the interview with the amazing Pirates game designer Mike Mulvihill. I'd love to hear your thoughts on it, whether that's a comment on YouTube, follow-up questions in the thread at Pirates with Ben, or commentary on Discord or Facebook. Make sure to like and subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss any episodes. There are links in the description for this episode where you can find some of the links and resources I used, and there's also an affiliate link to buy Pirate CSG items on eBay. Consider using that link as a way to support all my efforts to keep the game alive and hopefully even revive it as well. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you in the next episode.